Tonight, I learned to check my Corvette's oil the old-fashioned way. I play with the world's crappiest jack-in-the-box. And I finally say, F*** it. This is one of the most important parts on your car because it attaches your wheel to the car itself and allows the wheel to spin. Wheel bearings are a wear item, and they wear faster on the racetrack than they do on the street. I learned about that firsthand at Road Atlanta last year. I was driving a Miata in a race and had a wheel bearing fail, and the rear wheel came off the car instantly with no warning whatsoever, and I went for a ride. It was very scary, but luckily I didn't hit anything and nobody hit me, so I definitely got away with it. And when Goldie's wheel bearings started to make noise, I knew it was time to install a fresh set of race bearings. So that's what we're gonna do today. This is the bearing that I went with. It's a race bearing from SKF, and I got these pre-installed with ARP extended length studs. Something I thought would be fun to do that I forgot to do last time is to weigh the factory wheels and tires versus the new wider ones. So factory front wheel and tire, 52 pounds. And now the Nankang AR1 in a 315 width compared to 275, also 52 pounds. Just to illustrate how much wider the new front is, that's a 315 sitting next to a 275. The factory rear is a lot beefier. It's a 325 and it comes in at 63 pounds. I wasn't expecting this. The new rear, which is a 335, only weighs 55 pounds compared to 63 for the factory. All said and done, we're saving 16 pounds when we run this wheel and tire setup, despite it being quite a bit bigger. All right, to give you an idea of what we've got going on here, here's our bearing. We need to remove the bolts that hold it onto the spindle. This bolt and this bolt back here are accessible, but there's one that's directly behind this nut and we can't get at that. So what we need to do to get the spindle off is to disconnect the upper and lower ball joints and remove this tie rod end. All right, to pop these ball joints, I used a Harbor Freight ball joint separator tool. And it worked really well for the tie rod end and the upper ball joint, but when it got to the lower ball joint, the tool wasn't big enough to fit around it. So I had to break out the Dremel and modify the tool a little bit to get it to fit. Good Lord. Now this is why you should always make sure you have the right tools before you start. Here are the Torx bolts that hold the hub onto the spindle. I have a T50, which is too small, and I have a T60, which is too big. I need a T55. So before I go out and grab the missing bit, I'm going to take the other front spindle off, and then I'm going to move on to the rears. Fast forward a little bit and got the front driver's side off. And I also did the rear driver's side because I wanted to know how to do it before I filmed it. And I did get it off, but it did not go well. I don't want to complain, but what I hate is when I'm doing something where I don't really know how hard it's gonna be, I don't know what challenges I'm gonna run into, and I hit these situations where it's like, am I doing this completely wrong, or do I just need to like hit it with a hammer? And in this case, on the other side, I hit something with a hammer when I shouldn't have, and I ended up damaging a part, and now I'm gonna have to replace it, and that's gonna create a whole bunch more work, and it costs me money, and it's costing me time. I'm not gonna be able to drive the car today, and it makes me upset. For me, this is sort of project car hell. It's not that like any particular thing is so hard to do or so expensive or whatever it is. It's just when you haven't done it before, it's really uncomfortable sometimes to try to figure it out because you can bang your head against the wall and it's like, if I do this, am I gonna strip something or am I gonna break something or am I gonna like, you know, do it wrong? I hate that feeling of being bad at something, but the only way around that is to just do it and learn how to do it. And yeah, it would be nice if there was some like Corvette master mechanic who I could apprentice with. It's not feasible, right? I'm doing this in my garage and I'm learning as I go. So I guess hopefully this is gonna like build character or something, but for me right now, this is just like the crappiest part because who cares about the wheel bearings, right? Like wheel bearings aren't gonna make me go any faster. They're just gonna prevent me from dying. And I guess that's important, but it's hard to be excited about it. Come join me on the journey of removing a spindle from the rear of a Corvette C6 Z06. All right, the first thing we need to do is get the caliper off here. You want to make sure your parking brake isn't on and then the rotor should just come right off. The next thing that we want to do is loosen this axle nut. I'm going to use a big ratchet to do it. I think that it's going to spin. This Milwaukee impact is so killer. Does like 1,400 foot-pounds of torque or something like that. So if this can't get it off, almost nothing will. Next up, we're gonna remove this tie rod, which I believe is an 18 millimeter. All right, so the ball joint separator tool slides in between the joint there, and then this piece presses down. I did need to modify the tool a little bit to get it to work with the bigger ball joints, and see how easy that one just popped right out. A little gritty in the movement there. All right, there's the parking brake bracket. Next, we're going to get this shock out of the way. Great. This nut that holds on the lower ball joint can't come off because of this boot thing, so I need to get this half shaft out. Ladies and gentlemen, we got him. And now for the least fun jack-in-the-box in the world. Jesus. This is the bolt we've been trying to get at. These you could get out without removing anything. This one, you have to get it off of that ball joint. So here's that half shaft I took out, and when I was hammering on it to try to get it unstuck, I think I inadvertently hammered it against something and split the boot open. So that boot needs to be replaced and it needs to be repacked with grease. Got the T55 Torx bit. Let's see if we can get the wheel bearings out of the spindles. I've read some horror stories online about these things, and they are held in there with blue Loctite. So if the first one doesn't come out easily, I'm going to try some heat on it, I think, but I'm hopeful that it's just gonna pop right out. Nice. Oh, and that's red Loctite. All right, let's try the big dog. I want to see if I can illustrate how much beefier the new ones are than the old ones. So here's the old one. There's the new one. This flange here is so much thicker on the new ones. Well, I thought that reassembling the front was going to be a piece of cake, but then the nut wouldn't go onto the lower ball joint. Turns out that my tool had kind of smashed the thread, so I had to do a little bit of cutting. All right, I have the car reassembled at least as much as I can. Putting it back together was really easy. And now that I've taken it apart and put it back together again, done the wheel bearing job, it really doesn't seem like a very big deal. It's funny to me how intimidated I was by it. But I guess that's the point, is to learn. I'm bummed that I'm not gonna be able to drive the car today, but I do have one more thing I wanna do before I wrap. My dual mode exhaust is not working. When I installed the mild to wild switch, it didn't do anything because the solenoid appears to have failed and the exhaust valves are stuck open. One of you was kind enough to post in the comments the GM part number for the replacement solenoid, and it turns out that Amazon had that with Prime delivery, so I went ahead and ordered it. It's here now. We're gonna slap it in and see if it fixes the exhaust. All right, you guys said that you access this thing behind the tail light, and it looks like the tail light comes out with just a little Torx screw. Sure enough. Okay. Okay, see it. Jesus. Well, that's a small victory, I guess. I'm glad the exhaust is working the way it's supposed to. Of course, the irony is that I bought the mild to wild switch to make the exhaust louder, and instead it allows me to make it quieter. But I guess that's a good thing for driving on the highway. That's gonna wrap it up. If you wanna see a video where Goldie's actually driving, I'm posting a link right here. Thank you guys for coming along for the ride. We'll see you next time.